What's going on, everyone? So, the upcoming prequel to the Friday the 13th franchise, Camp Crystal Lake. We got our Mrs. Voorhees, we got Pamela Voorhees, Linda Caravelli. She's the one that's going to play it. You might recognize her from like Scooby-Doo as Velma. She's been in a bunch of stuff. Grandma's Boy. Did a whole video on that announcement. If you're interested in that, go check that out. But what I want to talk about is I've seen a lot of people make a good point. So I wanted to kind of touch on this and dive into it. And that is the father. Right? Elias Voorhees. We know that this is going to be a prequel and backstory to Jason and, how things kind of evolved and how Pamela became how she became and all that. And, there's already kind of little plot details that have been announced, such as, Pamela supposedly was like, an aspiring singer and did all these things, but gave it up for her child, right? And you have the father that bred Jason, that it's like, hey, you should have him and you need to have him in this franchise, right? Because Pamela wasn't a single mother. She wasn't like, she had the kid, right? Like, how did that story become? And what is that story? Well, there is an actual story. There is a backstory to Elias Voorhees. And essentially, he was, like, in a nutshell, right? There's, like, details and story and things like that if you're interested in that. Definitely look into kind of the backstory and lore into Elias. But, no, he was somebody that was very abusive, right? Drinker and, abused Pamela when she was pregnant. And that ended up causing, or is led to believe to have caused, the deformities and issues of Jason, right? That he was kind of the direct result of that for Jason Voorhees. And then ultimately, Pamela took an axe, gave her husband 40 whacks. Got to phrase it the right way. It didn't really give him 40 whacks, but ended up taking the axe and, Elias. And that's how it ended up happening. And something that I've talked about is how are they going? Because, again, at the end of the day, Friday the 13th, it's a horror franchise. Even Camp Crystal Lake, horror franchise. You need kills, you need all these different things that go and pertain to the franchise, right? So how are you going to tell that story and keep the traditionals happy, right? Is this going to be just like a story and people aren't really going to die and it's just going to be this thing where, at the end, maybe it comes to Elias meeting his end and it's kind of, but I could see that. I wouldn't mind something like that. I think that'd be kind of cool. Just like a real, like just good, dialogue written, storytelling driven film where, you kind of just get the story. I'm all for good storytelling, but at the end of the day, like, you go to see Friday the 13th to see Jason, knocking off heads and doing all this craziness, right? Like, and I just think that you're going to have some type of kills and, you're going to have some, blood and the things that you want from a Friday the 13th film. Now, there are several ways that they can go about that. One, it could be something where it's just like flashbacks, right? Like where it's like you have Jason in modern time running through a camp or something like that. And then there's like these flashbacks or maybe you could do something where you have, you're at a Camp Crystal Lake. You have all the counselors. They're telling the backstory of Jason, right? And that's kind of how this leads into it. Tell the story. And then you have, Jason in the background and he's like knocking off campers along the way, right? Somebody gets up to go to the bathroom or whatever. It starts knocking off campers around the way. And then now you have something in that regard to where it's like, okay, bodies are dropping, right? But you're still getting the backstory. You're still telling things. Or you could do something where Pamela is, what if she was like, is the camp the first, actual onslaught she had? Or had she done that prior, right? We know that she took out the dad. Okay, well, she take out the dad. Was that the first time? Did she have some others along the way? Is that how she kind of, maybe had a slight successful? Could you get some kind of like Pearl type, X and Maxine style thing where she was just like taking people out to get to the top type thing? Like that could be something that's kind of interesting. That could be something that they kind of tie in. There's a lot of ways that they can come up with these creative kills and and find ways to kind of balance both, right? That at the end of the day is going to be up to the writers and the storytelling and all that stuff. But I do think you need to have the backstory of Elias, right? Because if we're going to really do a full-fledged prequel, if this is really going to set up the story of Jason Voorhees and how he became what he became and how he did what he did, his father plays a big part in all of that. And again, it's believed that because of his father's, the way he treated the mother, that may have ultimately resulted in the issues that Jason had. And, that ends up becoming a whole thing. And again, there's a whole backstory and story between Pamela and Elias. And so I want to see them do that. And like I said, lots of people I've seen, whenever I do a Jason video and I made the announcement about Linda playing Pamela Voorhees and all that stuff, I got several comments from people that were like, hey, what about Elias, right? Like that, again, it's a prequel, there's a backstory. And they're right? They're right. Like, we need to have a full backstory, right? Because again, people that are privy to the backstory and understand all those things, which again exists, we know what that is. Now, could they just change it entirely? Possibly. Could it be something where, Pamela's on the road, living her best life, doing her thing, gets knocked down, if you get me, right? And 9 months later ends up having a kid? Sure. That could be something. Could they go that route? But I do think it would just be much more interesting to see and much more, true to the franchise if they actually did the Elias route, had him involved, had that story, had him be this monster, and, that was him kind of being the precursor. Maybe he even took out a couple people, right? Maybe he was Jason before Jason type thing. And he just had this rage and was just this, this monster in many ways that ended up breeding this other monster. Like, that could be something that could be really cool. That could be something that kind of, tells an interesting story, and could be a lot of fun, in my opinion. But, we'll see kind of what direction they go with this and how they introduce it, at least at the time of recording this video. Obviously, things can change. I mean, while you're watching this video, maybe we get an announcement on that. So they're still, working through everything. They still have a lot to film and put together ahead. So, I'm sure that they'll figure it out and pick a direction. But anyway, as always, this is a discussion, and I pass question to you. Let me know your thoughts and opinions down in the comments below. What do you think? How you feel? What are your thoughts? Do you agree with me? Disagree with me? Kind of mixed in the middle? Do you want to see Elias and this upcoming prequel, Camp Crystal Lake? Do you think, no, you don't need that, kind of tell the new story, just keep it Pamela and Jason centric, Pamela and Jason focused? Again, how you feel either way, I love to hear it. So let me know down in the comments below. That being said, if you haven't liked this video, hit that like button. Helps me a lot, so we enjoy these types of videos, and I truly appreciate it. Not subscribe to the channel. What are you doing? Hit that subscribe button. Turn on the bell notifications. Appreciate y'all. See you in the next one. Thank you.